Today, I'm meeting with Michelle Parks, who's one of our consultants at Property Elite. I'm Rachel. I'm the co-founder of Property Elite and a chartered surveyor. Michelle and I are going to be talking today about dealing with nerves. So, Michelle, I know that this is kind of something that really interests you personally. So, do you want to tell me a little bit about why that is?
Yeah, hi Rachel, and it's great to be with you today. So for me, it's really important that we recognise when we get nervous. In the run up to my own APC back in 2012, I had a horrendous time and got to the stage where I would sit in mocks and say, don't know, don't know. And it just repeated. And I had to put in place a rescue plan to allow me to proceed to my own APC. So it got me thinking about how I can help others avoid being in that same situation and what I should have really been doing.
Yeah.
And if I can help others to avoid going through the same emotions, then, it's a job well done. So, Rachel, I'm sure you can remember your own APC. Do you want to share what that was like for you?
Certainly can. It's something that I'm never going to forget. And I did mine rather later because I qualified by correspondence course, which was old way back in the day. And so I've been working for quite a long time when I came up for my interview. But I remember how the nerves hit me. It was just giving me, I was completely trembling. And I remember having to pick up my water glass with two hands because I was terrified. I was literally going to throw it all over myself. So, it manifests itself in lots of different ways, doesn't it? The way, for individuals. I think it is very, very different for everyone that's concerned. But you've been doing some stuff for RICS, haven't you? So perhaps has that been something that you've had some good feedback from?
Yes, so I recorded a podcast for the RICS on dealing with nerves, and I do a lot of presentations on dealing with nerves, and really that came about primarily due to the change from face-to-face assessments to online. And I noticed that it's much harder to tune into body language from candidates. And I've seen candidates, that's starting to get shaky in the assessments. I've seen tears. I've seen candidates almost stop breathing. So for me, it really highlighted the different ways that people manifest nerves and the different things they go through. And it's really interesting when you were talking about lifting the glass of water, because I remember it being a big jug of water and being too scared to pour my jug of water in case I threw it everywhere. Um, and I think online brings its own challenges as well,
Yeah, there's no going
because
around it.
it's harder for the candidate to see reassurance from the panel as
True.
well. What do you find in that situation?
I've seen, like you, lots of different reactions from candidates, and I think that what's important is that a good chair on a panel will understand the way that the candidates are feeling and try and put them at ease through the process. But there are lots of strategies, aren't there, that candidates can think about and adopt to try and help them control nerves. And I mean, I think that the information that's out there about that now is so great. I mean, obviously, internet didn't exist when I did my assessment, so there was no advice around this, and I think it's really important that candidates have an idea of what they can do to mitigate that absolute terror, which can strike even when you are very well prepared. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think one of the big things is what I say to candidates is think about the last time you felt nervous. What was that situation?
Right.
What did it feel like for you? Because if we recognize what happens to us when we feel nervous, then we can start to recognize that in ourselves. And there's lots of things we can do, from short breathing techniques. There's some fantastic videos on YouTube. One's called box breathing, and I recommend everyone go and have a look at that, because it's a really good way to calm yourself when you find yourself in that situation where you start to recognize those symptoms, and you can quickly bring yourself back to a state of calm. But other things you can do as a candidate is, I think one of the main reasons candidates get really nervous is that worry about what's coming and the uncertainty around that. But then also the feeling of not being prepared. You know, you worry that you've not done enough. And what I always advise candidates when I'm working with them is to not think so much about the final assessment interview when you're studying, and actually break down all your competencies into mini study chunks, and then go and have a Q&A on it, so that you're practicing verbalizing your answers, and you're building up your confidence in because you're now able to answer the things that you've just studied. And that massively helps, and you can see that confidence rising, and that can help to eliminate some of the nerves.
It's a really good coping strategy, isn't it? And I like what you say about the breathing as well. Breathing can really, really help you to ground yourself, can't it? And really bring some calm into a stressful situation. So, I mean, with other methods of preparation for APC interview, I sort of think that some people, you were talking about your experience with mock interviews, which weren't particularly positive, and I've had some experience with other candidates who've been in that situation. I think partly because interviews that are held internally within firms can be a little bit scary, because the candidates don't want to admit that they don't know something to people that they work with, and people who will have potentially a view on their career. And also, do you think that sometimes people that aren't assessors can ask really, really random questions, which perhaps don't, which perhaps frighten the candidate even more than having a mock interview with people that are experienced in assessing?
Yeah, and I think definitely if you think back to when you go for job interviews, for example, it is much scarier going for an internal job interview with people that you know, rather than going externally, because you're worried about making a fool of yourself. So I always advise to have external mocks as well as those internal ones to deal with that. But you're absolutely right, and I'm not sure what your experience was when you were preparing for your APC, but I remember having internal mock interviews with people who weren't involved in the process and being asked some really ridiculous questions, and also not structured in the way assessors would ask them. As you know, we undergo quite intensive training, which includes how we structure the questions. And if we have those Q&A sessions and mocks with people that are used to structuring the questions that way, then you're more likely to start to feel more comfortable with the process, aren't you? So what I was wondering, because I know that there's some firms that, insist on those internal mocks, and that's fine. But what would your tips be, Rachel, for if a candidate is being faced with a mock where they're not being asked questions by people that are actual assessors, and maybe not asking them in the correct way?
Well, it's a bit difficult, isn't it? Because in some ways, any practice is better than no practice at all. And it's certainly something that, I would say, and I do say, have as much practice as you can, but try. I think it's about trying to take the positives out of things, and perhaps making sure that you're touching base with the people that do know a little bit more assessing, so that should about assessing, so that should be hopefully the counsellor that's involved, and also perhaps going to one of the providers that's out there who can provide external mock interviews, which might give you a different perspective. I think that preparation in most of these things is key, isn't it? So, prepare. You can't do enough of it. But anyway, we could talk about this for an awfully long time because there's such a big subject. But thank you very much for joining me today, Michelle. I think it's been really helpful, and hopefully the candidates will take something from it.
Thank you, Rachel.